Have you ever walked away from a conversation knowing you should have spoken up, but didn't? A small comment, a subtle slight, a laugh that lingered too long. You stayed calm, you stayed composed, but something inside you cracked. Machiavelli warned that the erosion of power doesn't begin with force. It begins with silence, with tiny decisions that feel wise, but cost you your presence. In this video, we explore 7 hidden mistakes that quietly destroy your image in the eyes of others. See which ones you've made, and more importantly, learn how to stop. Mistake 1. You trade respect for approval. It rarely feels like you're losing. In fact, it feels noble. You keep the peace. You lower your tone. You let small offenses pass. You tell yourself this is self-mastery, that you're rising above, that you're taking the higher road. And maybe, at first, it is, but only when you choose it freely, not when you do it to be accepted. Because what you see as strength, others often interpret as softness. They won't tell you this directly. They'll simply stop regarding you as someone who must be taken seriously. Machiavelli understood this clearly. He did not glorify cruelty, but he warned that being loved is not enough. If forced to choose, it is safer to be feared than loved. Not because fear is inherently better, but because fear creates hesitation, and hesitation protects your position. The one who is feared is not crossed easily. The one who is merely liked becomes a convenience. Pleasant to be around, but easy to dismiss. What does this mean in your life? It means every time you bite your tongue when a boundary should be drawn, you're training them. You are showing them that your approval is cheap, that you will trade your standards for their affection, and what costs nothing is never valued. Over time, you begin to vanish in their eyes. Not because you are wrong, but because you are forgettable. And forgettable is the most dangerous place for a person with purpose to live in. A Stoic does not seek to be feared through arrogance. He does not shout to be seen, but he makes himself known through stillness, through boundary, through clarity. Respect, in this world, is not born from kindness alone. It is born from consistency, from showing that your dignity is not negotiable, that your silence is not weakness, that your presence is not a prize handed out for applause. Imagine a man who lets the first insult slide, who nods and smiles through subtle dismissals, who downplays his own truth to avoid making others uncomfortable. He believes he's being virtuous, but what he's done is allow the erosion of his own command. And those around him see it before he does. They start testing more, interrupting more, depending on his politeness to shield their own disrespect. If you want to be taken seriously, your first task is not to be agreeable. It is to be immovable where it matters. Speak softly, yes, but draw the line boldly. Let others feel the edge of your presence when it is crossed. They do not need to fear you, but they must know they cannot ignore you. Kindness without strength becomes a currency no one respects. But when paired with principle, it becomes a force that shapes the room. Do not let your need to be liked cost you the one thing that cannot be given by others, your self-command. Respect begins when you stop asking for it and start living in a way that makes it the only response they can give. Mistake 2. You abandon your value by being too present. You are always there. You respond without pause. You reply before the echo of the message fades. You show up even when uninvited. And somewhere deep within, you believe this proves your loyalty. You think people will see your consistency, your readiness, your ever-open door, and they will reward it with respect. But they will not, because what is always near loses its weight. What is easily reached loses its reverence. Machiavelli warned of this with ruthless clarity. He said men are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous. It was not bitterness. It was vision without illusion. He saw the world not as it should be, but as it is. And what he understood was simple: when you're always available, others stop feeling privileged by your presence. They begin to feel entitled to it. They no longer see your attentiveness as generosity. They see it as duty. And when you finally choose to say no, when you finally step back to breathe, to protect your peace, they do not admire your strength. They resent the change because you never trained them to appreciate your presence. You trained them to expect it. This is not about becoming distant or cold. It is about becoming sovereign. A man who is too easy to access becomes a man too easy to overlook. Every figure who has ever held power, from emperors to philosophers, understood this law of presence. If you wish to be respected, you must control access to yourself, and not only physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, because your energy, your time, your attention, these are not to be given freely to every voice that calls your name. They are to be measured, guarded, and offered only to those who have earned it. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic, ruled not by always being seen, but by being deeply intentional with his presence. He journaled in solitude. He led through clarity, not constant attention. He knew that silence holds power, that mystery creates respect, that if you are always visible, always answering, always giving, you become a vessel emptied by others. You are no longer perceived as a source of strength, but as a convenience. Imagine a man who is always the first to answer, who never lets a message wait, who bends his schedule to meet every request. At first, he is praised, but over time, those around him stop seeing his sacrifices. They start asking more, expecting more, demanding more, and when he finally retreats, not out of spite, but from exhaustion, they accuse him of being distant. They never realized they were draining a well that was never infinite. That man thought his presence would inspire gratitude. Instead, it created dependence. And when dependence is broken, it does not leave behind admiration. It leaves behind frustration. The Stoics teach us that we must govern ourselves before we seek to influence others. You do not owe your availability to those who do not respect your boundaries. You do not need to explain your silence or your distance. You only need to live with intention. Detach from the need to be constantly visible. Let your absence become a presence of its own. Let others feel the weight of your silence. Let them remember the strength of your stillness. If you want to be respected, vanish more often. Let your time become a rare gift. Let your voice be something they look forward to, not something they take for granted. Create space around you that others must earn the right to enter, not out of arrogance, but out of the unshakable clarity that your energy is sacred. Because, at the end of the day, what you offer without discretion will be taken without gratitude. And the man who disappears with purpose is far more powerful than the one who is always waiting to be called. Withdraw not in weakness, but in wisdom. Let them miss you, let them wonder, and in that space, let your value grow. Mistake 3. You drain your power by explaining too much. This mistake hides in plain sight. It does not announce itself with weakness, but with effort. You speak too much. You explain when no one asked. You defend choices no one challenged. And beneath it all lies one quiet belief. If they just knew your intentions, they would understand. They would treat you better. But Machiavelli would remind you that people do not respond to the truth. They respond to perception. As he wrote, "The vulgar are always taken by appearances, not what is real, but what seems real, and when you speak too much. What seems real is uncertainty, not because your reasoning is flawed, but because your abundance of words betrays your need for approval. In the eyes of power, restraint is strength. When you over-explain, you are not clarifying, you are revealing. You are showing that you seek validation, that you need to be accepted, that you fear being misunderstood. And those who fear misunderstanding are seen not as principled, but as pliable. Every added sentence becomes an opening. Every clarification becomes a signal. They see someone who is desperate to be seen in a good light, and they know they can tilt that light at will. Imagine a man in a room who, after stating a simple boundary, begins to soften his tone. He adds qualifiers. He rushes to explain. He tries to ensure no one feels uncomfortable. His truth is clear, but his delivery floods the room with apology. And what do others see? Not conviction, but fragility. Not firmness, but fear. He believes he's being transparent. They see a man who does not trust the weight of his own stance. Machiavelli knew that words have mass only when they are few. He believed in mystery, in silence, in the weight of what is unsaid, and so did the Stoics. Epictetus taught that wisdom begins with listening. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that action, not explanation, defines the self. The Stoic man does not beg to be understood. He lives in alignment with virtue and lets his silence hold the burden of his strength. He speaks when needed. He explains only what's essential. He does not seek to be agreed with. He seeks to be unmoved by misunderstanding. If your truth stands on solid ground, it does not need scaffolding built from endless speech. If your values are clear, they do not need to be justified to those who lack them. The man who explains too much unknowingly gives others the script to his own undoing. He hands them his motives, his doubts, his internal compass, and in doing so, he invites manipulation. The lesson is not to speak less for the sake of being quiet. The lesson is to speak with purpose, to leave space between your words for others to reflect. Silence makes the wise man heavy. Over-explanation makes him light enough to be carried away by opinion. The next time you feel the urge to justify yourself, pause. Ask yourself whether clarity demands this or whether your ego does. Because sometimes the most powerful position is not to be understood. It is to be undeniable. And nothing is more undeniable than a man who knows what he stands for and refuses to hand his dignity to the crowd for approval. Mistake 4. You let small insults become your silence. You do not raise your voice. You keep your composure. You believe in calm over chaos. And so when someone cuts you off mid-sentence, you smile and yield. When they disguise a jab as a joke, you laugh along. When your ideas are dismissed in silence, you say nothing. You tell yourself this is control, that patience is proof of your strength. But Machiavelli would say otherwise. He would say they are watching, not your inner peace. Not your moral reasoning, but your posture, your silence, your willingness to endure, because power, as he understood it, is not what you think. It is what others see. Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. He wrote, meaning, they do not evaluate you by your intentions, but by your reactions. And when they see you accept even the smallest slight without acknowledgement, they draw a conclusion. Not that you are evolved, not that you are wise, but that you are harmless. That you can be touched without consequence, and nothing invites further disrespect like the absence of resistance. This does not mean you must become reactive. A Stoic is not a flame that leaps at every wind, but neither is he a stone that invites footprints. The Stoic corrects without commotion. He sees the insult for what it is and responds not with outrage, but with clarity, because where there is no boundary, there will be no respect. And where there is no correction, there will be escalation. Imagine a man who is constantly interrupted in meetings, who chuckles at jokes made at his expense, who shrinks when others take credit for his words. He believes he is keeping the peace, but what he is keeping is a reputation for quiet submission. The others in the room are not inspired by his patience. They are emboldened by his passivity, and slowly, without realizing it, he becomes invisible. His presence no longer shapes the room, it bends to it. Marcus Aurelius taught us that we are not harmed by events, but by our judgment of them. But he also reminded himself daily that dignity must be defended, not by argument, but by action, a glance, a pause, a shift in energy, a refusal to respond. These are not theatrics. They are lines drawn without speaking, and in a world that watches more than it listens, these silent responses often say more than any speech could. So the next time someone crosses that invisible line, do not explode, do not lecture, but do not let it slide either. Let your silence be structured. Let your stillness send a signal. Withdraw warmth. End the conversation. Shift your eyes with deliberate coldness. Even the smallest correction, made with calm precision, becomes a statement. I saw that, and I do not permit it, because if you say nothing, you teach them everything. And the lesson they learn is that you will carry their offenses for the sake of peace. But there is no peace in being quietly diminished. Draw the line, not in anger, but with the serene conviction of one who knows their worth. Let them see it, let them feel it, and let them understand that silence is not permission. It is warning. Mistake 5. You plead with reason instead of leading with presence. There will come a moment when someone misrepresents you. They twist your words, mock your integrity, or cast your silence as guilt. And you respond as a rational man. You speak calmly. You bring clarity. You appeal to logic. You try to correct the misunderstanding like a wise judge defending truth. You believe that if the facts are laid bare, the audience will see, but Machiavelli would shake his head. Not because you are wrong, but because you are out of position. Truth, in the hands of power, is not what matters. Perception is. He wrote that the vulgar are always taken by appearances, that people do not follow the most honest man. They follow the one who appears unshaken. And when you try to win back control with reason, when you explain yourself to someone who just insulted you, you are no longer leading the moment. You are reacting to it. And when you are on the defensive, no one sees strength. They see submission wrapped in eloquence. Think of a courtroom when the powerful are attacked. They do not beg to be understood. They shift the frame. They do not argue to be seen as innocent. They act in ways that make the attack itself look foolish. Because to explain yourself to someone who already disrespects you is to place your dignity into their hands. It is to place yourself on trial without a judge and without a verdict that can favor you. The moment you plead, even with calm logic, you are already losing. Marcus Aurelius never advised persuasion for the sake of ego. He advised indifference toward the opinions of those who cannot comprehend virtue. A Stoic does not waste energy correcting minds that are not seeking truth. Instead, he maintains his posture, acts in alignment with his values, and lets results speak louder than rebuttals. Imagine this: a colleague undermines you publicly. Instead of matching their energy or walking away, you begin defending your intent. You outline your reasoning. You try to win the room with clarity, but you have already lost something more important than the argument. You have lost the frame. The people watching are not measuring your logic. They are measuring who stands taller in the chaos. And when you look like the one seeking validation, the verdict is decided before you finish your sentence. The Stoic path is not to win with words, it is to win with presence. If someone distorts your actions, you do not owe them proof. You owe yourself composure. You withdraw your energy from those who insult you, not because you are weak, but because you do not negotiate your worth. And if the moment demands action, act decisively, not with fury, not with justification, but with a stillness that unnerves those who seek reaction. Do not forget this: the world respects silence that is rooted in strength, not because it hides the truth, but because it reveals who does not need to prove anything. Your job is not to explain yourself to those who distort. Your job is to leave them wondering why they ever thought you could be diminished by their words. Let them speak. You remain still, and in your stillness, their noise becomes meaningless. That is how power responds to insult, without permission, without apology, and without a single wasted word. Mistake 6. You try to redeem dignity with kindness after the blow to your image. You feel the sting, not the loud kind, but the kind that settles deep. They looked down on you, they dismissed you, and instead of stepping back, you stepped forward with more kindness. You smiled wider, offered more, gave them another chance to see your worth. But Machiavelli would call this a fatal miscalculation. Because once they have placed you beneath them, your friendliness does not challenge their judgment, it confirms it. You become the pleaser, the agreeable figure who absorbed the insult and returned with a grin. You tell yourself it is resilience, that you are showing character. But what they see is someone too eager to be accepted, someone trying to fix a fractured image with soft words and lowered shoulders. And the truth is, once you attempt to rebuild dignity through niceness, you have already accepted the terms of defeat. You have taken the frame they handed you and placed yourself inside it. This is not what power looks like. Power does not seek to be forgiven. It seeks to be redefined when your image is questioned. Machiavelli did not advise a gentler tone. He advised silence, scarcity, unpredictability. You remove your presence. You become less visible, but more significant. You do not re-enter the room with a smile. You re-enter with stature, elevated, not explained. Now take a hard look at yourself. You let the jokes pass without correction. You reasoned with those who undermined you. You tried to make everything comfortable again. On the surface, it felt noble, but in reality, it was a slow surrender, a pattern of quiet humiliation, built from one concession at a time. And here is the harshest truth. Others saw it before you did. That is why it is dangerous. Because you are not being defeated by cruelty, you are being defeated by a game you did not know you were playing. Machiavelli mapped that game centuries ago, and the terrifying part is this: they do not need to defeat you, they only need you to dismantle yourself, to give away your posture, to seek redemption in the eyes of those who never respected you to begin with. But you can stop, you can pause. You can reclaim the frame, not by being softer, but by becoming untouchable again. Withdraw, rise, let the silence speak. Let your absence disturb the room, not for revenge, but for your own rebalance. You have now seen 6 of the 7, and if you are still here, you already sense what comes next. The final mistake does not shout weakness. It dresses in virtue. It wears the mask of strength, but that is why it is the most dangerous of all, because it feels like your last defense, when in fact, it is your last illusion, and we are about to name it. Mistake 7. You mistake virtue for defense. You convince yourself that if you remain kind, honest, loyal, the world will one day acknowledge your worth, that those who took advantage of you will come to their senses, that those who disrespected you will finally offer recognition. But Machiavelli would call this thinking dangerous. Not because virtue is false, but because virtue without strength becomes bait. Goodness does not guard you in a world that rewards leverage. It does not demand respect unless it is backed by presence. And when you offer your decency expecting protection, you will be met not with honor, but indifference. The Stoics taught that the external world is not obligated to honor our inner values. Marcus Aurelius never asked the world to meet him with fairness. He trained himself to remain unmoved by praise or injustice. Likewise, Machiavelli warned that those who wait for the world to be fair will be overtaken by those who understand how to shape it. You may walk into a room with a pure heart, but if you carry no edge, you will leave that room unheard. It happens subtly. You forgive too easily. You return to those who humiliated you. You try to explain yourself to people who were never listening. You continue to play fairly in a game where the rules are rigged. You believe that your endurance of pain is proof of strength, but in truth, it is mistaken for weakness. You confuse humility with silence. You confuse discipline with the absence of boundaries. And every time you excuse the insult, they see it and they remember. The world does not mock cruelty. It mocks the good man who still believes that virtue alone will carry him. But that can change. You do not need to abandon your values. You need to stop placing them in the hands of people who do not recognize them. You stop asking to be seen. You start making people hesitate before dismissing you, not with threats, but with the stillness of someone who cannot be moved. You stop explaining your worth. You let it speak in your posture. You are not too kind. You are simply too predictable, and in a world that studies weakness like a map, predictability is an invitation. The same habits that got you overlooked can be reversed. You do not need to change your character. You need to change what you tolerate. Become rare again. Let your silence be warning, not surrender. Let your absence be a presence. When you do that, the room shifts, the laughter stops, the respect begins. Not because they finally understand you, but because they know they cannot touch you. That is the power Machiavelli wrote about. Not to destroy others, but to stop destroying yourself. So now you've seen them, the 7 quiet concessions that don't just lower your position, they erase it. Each one begins small. A smile you didn't mean, a silence you should have broken, a kindness misread as weakness. One by one, they made you predictable, dismissible, easy to overlook. But here's the truth, none of them are permanent. You don't need to change who you are. You only need to change what you allow. Start today, not when someone crosses the line again. Start before that. Let your silence gain weight. Let your presence hold boundaries without needing to raise your voice. And watch how people shift. They'll pause before interrupting. They'll choose their words more carefully. They won't know exactly what changed, but they'll feel it. That stillness, that unshakable clarity, that quiet signal that says, I will not be taken lightly. You are not here to be liked at all costs. You are here to stand for something, even if it makes others uncomfortable. That is the beginning of true respect. And once it begins, it does not need to be spoken. It follows you into every room, every glance, every word you choose not to explain. If this resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe so you never miss the deeper lessons still to come. And in the comments, write no more games. A simple promise that the old patterns end with you. Remember, dignity is not reclaimed in noise. It returns in silence, presence, and the decision to never be overlooked again. Your next chapter starts now, and what's coming will feel nothing like what you've left behind.